Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, good to see you all. Welcome to Primetime at the BU Library. Primetime at the BU Library's mission is to encourage lifelong learning beyond the classroom for faculty, students, and staff through its presentations, which are a collaboration of many different offices on campus with the Friends of the BU Library. I'm Keith Brooks from the Education Department, but I'm here as a part of the Faculty Development Team. Join us on Thursday, April 28th in celebration of National Poetry Month. Dr. Angela Shannon, English, and Dr. Mark Rose, music, Julia Moen, social work, and Will Keeler from the University Library will be sharing their favorite poetry at Primetime. The season is winding down, so the first 2 weeks in May we'll have our last 4 Primetime sessions for the season. Joan Tiffany, Jay Rasmussen, a Sankofa 2011 retrospective, and Chris Gers. Watch for posters and e-announcements for more details. Today, we welcome Dr. Steve Whiting. He will be sharing a timely topic for faculty: redesigning courses for online. Lessons learned moving on. An introduction to technology course online. Can we welcome him, please?
Thanks, Keith.
You're welcome, Steve.
Well, my name is Steve Whiting, and I'm going to be presenting what is clearly a not ready for prime time. I finished this up, well, it's been in the works for a while, but I finished it up about 4 o'clock last night. I was in Green Bay over the weekend and thought I'd have more time, but we spent it enjoying ourselves. So this presentation is actually coming out of 2 presentations I have the honor of doing this summer. One with Joyce LeMay at the Christian Business Faculty Association, and one at the Online Teaching Conference. 2 different presentations, and today I'll primarily be using material that's coming out of the CBFA presentation, significantly tailored for this audience. When I talked with Barrett and Bob and Matt and some other people about this, I thought, well, this is an opportunity to be a little bit evangelical, maybe, not in the biblical sense, but in the online learning sense. So I'm going to pull some information coming from some of the things TLTR has done, and some things that TLT has done, and some stats that we have, and then blending that in with some research and my own lessons learned. And lessons learned from Joyce LeMay as well. I'll try to attribute her lessons learned when we get there. So first, a definition. And I'm going to use this definition, and I'm going to kind of walk through my history with online learning at the same time. A traditional course would be, and GW's not here, I guess GW would be a traditional course, 0 online, 0 LMS, 0 technology basically. Most of us probably are doing web facilitated, where we're using the learning management tool. For the first 3 years I developed and deployed the courses I was teaching, and I just assumed everyone was using Blackboard in a way similar to me, and I had a hallway conversation with GW, and then I realized, oh, not everyone is using it. And I probably talked to Bob and found out that there's a lot of people who only post their syllabus or put very little content in the learning management system. And so my first 3 years, I was deploying web facilitated courses in CAS. The spring of my first year here, I taught 2 courses that would be considered blended or hybrid in the MBA program, where we were teaching 2 nights face-to-face, 2 nights online, 2 nights face-to-face. And if you look at just the contact hours, that would be 33%, but a lot of the work was also online, so it was probably more in that 50 to 60% online. Did that twice, and then I had the opportunity to teach in Craigens, go up and enjoy myself, play some golf before teaching. And before doing that, I had to redesign the course, because we were moving from a Tuesday night or a Monday night, 2 courses, 2 online, 2 courses, to teaching the whole course over the weekend, and then having 5 weeks, actually at that time it was 6 weeks online. And so that was my first exposure to redesigning a course online. And I met with Bob, and that'll be a theme, I think, in this presentation, is meeting with TLT is probably your best resource, my best recommendation to help you in that effort. And so I redesigned the course, had a lot of fun doing it, and then when I did that, I brought them to the lead faculty and said, hey, when I did this, here's some things I changed, here's some things I added, here's some things I modified. And he made those changes, brought them back into the more traditional 2 on, 2 online, 2 on. And that would be another message, probably another theme, is when you redesign courses for online, you can reuse those components in your traditional courses, and you should reuse those. It wasn't until after teaching here for 3 years that I designed a course fully online. And that course was my introduction to, not mine, the business department's Introduction to Technology and Applications course. It was taught prior to that, web facilitated. I had no online days. I had thought about this course being a really good one to do online, and when the grant came up, and one of my roles here is I was and am currently the chair of the TLTR committee. So I figured, well, if I'm the chair, maybe there's a good chance I'll be able to get a grant. No, I stepped out of that role. I said, all right, you in the room, you evaluate whether my proposal was any good. And for some reason, they selected it. Maybe there was there only 5 that year, maybe that was the year that we had 5. And so I got the grant, got a grant, and I redesigned the ITA course for online. And I'll talk about how I did that and some lessons learned from that, some things I did well and some things some mistakes I made. And then Molly Wickham and I, just this last spring, taught in the education department in the graduate program. She started a new certificate in teaching teachers how to teach with technology. And she was not comfortable with some aspects of the course. The person who was going to teach it had an issue, and so at the last minute we had to find someone, and she came to me, and I wasn't comfortable with the education, all of the rules and regulations and those components, and she was comfortable with that, so we did it together and had a good experience designing that course online. So I have some experience, although not nearly as much as some of the individuals in this room currently. So the CBFA conference that I'm doing this at, their theme comes out of Ecclesiastes, where they're using the Bible verse that says, what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And so the question is with online, is this something new? And some would argue, well, yes, it is. It's new. While others, many in this room, would say, well, it's not really anything new. I mean, we've had distance learning. We've had correspondence courses for 100 years. And the application of technology to learning has been going on even well before that. So it really isn't new. Although there are ways that now courses can be delivered that are interesting, making it easier, but the application of technology to education is not something new. I also included, why did I include ruts and bikes in here? And I included this because maybe this is one of the themes that came out of my experience. When I was teaching for those first 3 years, I don't know if anyone else has this experience, I felt like I was making adjustments to my course. I was tweaking my course constantly, every semester, every year. But when I look back on it now, and I look back at what I did, all I did was tweaked it. Kind of like my wife and I, when we would rearrange our bedroom, and Jim Hurd isn't here, and I can't do the analogies or the jokes about references to sex like he did. So that's probably the closest I can do is use a bedroom analogy. That when we redesigned our bedroom, as long as we kind of just looked at what was there, the most we would do is tweak something. We would move it a little bit. It wasn't until we had our floors resurfaced and we pulled everything out and we painted the walls. We took the paintings off there because we can't move the bed because the painting right there works with the bed. So it wasn't until we got rid of everything that we could re-envision the whole room. And we could ask the question, is this functional? Should we even have this in a bedroom? And so that process, I think, that analogy, I think, was useful for me, that I kind of got in a rut when I look back on things. And even if I replaced a textbook with another textbook, probably the most I did was changed one set of PowerPoints from one author to another set of PowerPoints, and maybe looked at it at a homework assignment or two. I was kind of in a rut. Not like I was bored with the class. I mean, I wasn't bored. I was still excited, but I really didn't make substantive changes to the course. So in preparing for this presentation and the CBFA presentation, I read some books, and some of these books are pretty thick. I'm not recommending that you read all those books. I found Matt actually pointed me to this one. I found this one to be very helpful. That was good resource, Matt. Some of you may be more interested in something like some articles that are on the web. This was a great article because in 2.5 pages it synthesizes a lot of research and tells you here are the benefits, a couple of the key benefits, here are a couple of the challenges. So there's some great short articles. The Sloan C organization, they have some great studies. Some of what I'm going to present are statistics that come out of that organization, and they also have training. They have lots of materials, very useful materials. And then another material that Matt keyed me to was a website called No Significant Difference, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So, online experiences. I'm going to look for yours now. So I want you to keep this in mind with the definition of blended, 30 to 79% online. Maybe half of your course or so online. And online would be fully online, 80% or more. Typically we're seeing, I think at Bethel we were defining fully online as 90%. We use the Sloan C definition here. So I handed out some clickers. A couple of you came late, you got clickers. You'll see why I asked these questions in a minute. They're different than the questions that that Barrett's committee put out. I'd like to understand your experience taking. Have you taken an online course? None. You've taken none. Click on one. You've taken a portion of one course. You've taken one class, 2 to 5, more than 5, or more than 5. And we've got to kind of whip through these because I'm not going to leave myself much time to get to the recommendations, and we want to get there. So we're going to go through these quick.
Do webinars count as a class?
A webinar. So not like a course, but just like a 2-hour professional development. I was thinking of that when I said the portion of one class. Okay. So I probably should put /webinar. Okay, and I closed the polls. So we've got a lot saying none and equally amount saying 2 to 5 or more than 5. Hybrid now, so not the fully online, but taking a portion of a course, 50%, 30%, 80%.
Thank you.
So less doing hybrid, some similar numbers doing the 2 to 5, taking hybrid courses. Now for that online or that hybrid course, was your experience very positive, very negative, neutral, positive, negative? This is for the online course. I'll ask the same question for your hybrid course. What was your perception overall? This could be learning objectives, but it's just overall, was your experience positive, negative? And if you didn't take one, you would say NA. So 50% positive, 10% negative. Probably one individual there. Taking your hybrid course, same thing. Very positive, very negative, neutral, NA if you didn't take one. Okay, more neutral and some very positive. Interesting how we switched from hybrid. We looked before, we had here, and now we've moved those to the right. Do you have experience teaching an online course? Again, online, fully online, 80% or more. No, portion, 1, 2 to 5, more than 5. So a mix of portion, 1, 2, or more than 5. Teaching a hybrid course. So again, that 50-50 course. Experience doing that. Same responses. Experience teaching. Did we just do this? No. I'm clicking forward. Experience teaching Okay. So now we're looking at the learning outcomes. Would you say that the learning outcomes on an online course, and this is whether you taught it, you've taken it, you know, whatever your answers were before, would you say that the learning outcomes, the achievement of learning outcomes is superior teaching online versus teaching face-to-face? Or is it the same? Or is it inferior or somewhat inferior? So we've got a mix of somewhat superior, somewhat inferior, same, and some way inferior online. Same question for hybrid. When looking at hybrid, superior, somewhat superior, same. Now we've moved a little bit. Now, I guess statistically it's probably, while we've come out of here, some of that's going here, but same to somewhat superior. Well, let's look at, actually I think this is the last two questions. Do you have a desire to teach an online course? Yes, very much. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Very, very negative. Whether you've taught before or not, you have a desire to teach fully online course. Okay, neutral or positive. We got a couple people that are here and not positive on it, not very negative on it. Okay, well, hopefully I'll change that by the end of today. Let's look at hybrid. Maybe that'll change for hybrid. Do you have more of an interest in teaching a hybrid course? Again, same scale. Very negative, very positive. Less very negative and some movement to the very positive and more neutral or positive. So, good. Okay. I did that maybe to add some statistics or some value, and then also some of those questions is going to relate to some of the national research that I'm going to highlight here. So online learning has been growing. When we compare online learning to just traditional enrollment, the total enrollment from 2008 to 2009 grew at about 2%. Whereas online, the enrollment in online classes grew at 21%. So we're seeing a lot more interest by students and some institutions to offer online classes. This is coming out of the Sloan C study that was just released. It's 2010. I shouldn't say just released, but was released in 2010. Barrett had run the numbers that when we did our early this year in TLTR, he brought in some numbers on what is CAS's, not the whole institution, but just CAS. What has our growth been for online? And this doesn't include summer. This is just fall, interim, spring. And so we can see we've grown from one course to 4 courses up to this last year we had 10 courses taught. And then on the other side we have the number of students from about 30 students to 200 students to 265 students this last year. Summer we've seen even more. If you add the two together, 25 plus 10, we've got about 35 classes in CAS for the whole year. And look at the growth there from about 3 to 2 to 4 to 19 to this summer, assuming everyone teaches that is currently in the system, we're looking at about 25 courses being taught this summer. And the students have grown proportionally as well, and I would expect or hope that we get some freshmen and some other students to enroll, and then this number will be maybe somewhere up here, maybe approaching 300 students this summer. That would probably be a good thing for our administration. We had 300 students this summer. Okay, so that's the growth. What about the perceptions? And so the Sloan C looked at, they looked at 2,500 higher education institutions, and they looked at the chief academic officers. What is their perception of online learning? You know, thinking of comparing that to the chief academic officers, that you out here, the perceptions you had. And this was more of a perception study. And what they've done, what they did is they tracked from 2003 to 2010 the same question I basically asked you. From a learning objective perspective, the vast majority would say the learning objectives are the same, whether it's taught online or face-to-face. Now you can see here the inferior has decreased slightly, the somewhat inferior has decreased slightly, and the superior has increased. I found this slide to be interesting, but when I got the next slide, this became even more interesting. They then asked, kind of the question I asked, slightly different. For your institution, do you offer anything online? Do you only offer online courses, or do you have a mix of online and face-to-face? And so when we go back to the inferior and the somewhat inferior, the vast majority of those that believe that are those who have no offerings. Now, Sloan C didn't identify whether or not, you know, this is a chicken or the egg. Well, do they not offer it because their research has shown? Or are they saying, we don't like it and we don't care what the research says, and so we're just going to pretend that it's worse? And they didn't comment on that. There was another study that Matt clued me into, a website, and then a couple studies on that website that weren't looking at perceptions, but they were actually measuring, trying to measure learning outcomes and comparing online versus face-to-face. And those studies, one of them went back all the way to the 20s, I think, looking at distance and correspondence courses and looking over, you know, almost 100 years. And they came up with the no significant difference hypothesis. Thomas Russell and Mike Simonson are two of the individuals that have been attributed with, I think, Mike Simonson with that term. And the two of them and others have been involved in many studies. One of the biggest studies was done by the U.S. Department of Education last year, where they did a meta-study, where they looked at 1,000 studies. They did a study of studies. And they eliminated all but 50 of them because they didn't meet their criteria. They didn't meet the criteria of the way the analysis was done, the hypothesis that they had didn't meet what they were looking for. They whittled it down to just 50. And in that analysis, they came up with this summary statement. Students in online learning conditions performed modestly better on average than those receiving the same material face-to-face. The no significant difference folks reference this, and I think some of their comments are, yeah, they say it's modestly better, but it's probably the same, and the modestly better is a result of things like, well, when you move a discussion from face-to-face to online, you can't say that's totally equivalent, because now that it's online, students can think longer, they can access resources, they can go back to it and look at it over and over again. There's lots of things that allow the student to focus on that task more so than 5 minutes in a class. Likewise, if you say, well, I've got a lecture where I presented for 50 minutes, and now I took that lecture and I put it online. And even if I just put the whole 50 minutes online, which I wouldn't recommend, learners can go back and they can view that mediated PowerPoint multiple times. They can stop it and start it and go to the bathroom and now be comfortable when they're listening to it. So there's lots of things that could change this to say, well, it is no significant difference. But if you look at these, it is either, well, there's no significant difference from the learning objectives, or it's slightly better, I think. Maybe you can argue with me later. So when I looked at those studies and thought of my own experiences, I had pictures of, well, some people might think of online learning as the land of milk and honey, where, you know, we should all do online and we should all do it right now. Where other people might be thinking of online learning as, no, it's the desert. I'm lost in the wilderness and I'm going to be griping and groaning for 40 years before I join that crowd. And most of us are probably somewhere on the spectrum, more in the middle. And I would say myself, I'm probably more on this side of the spectrum because I've seen the benefits, but there are also some concerns that I have about the use of technology without thinking about how to deploy that technology effectively. So I'm here to say, come on, the water's great, jump in. And yet some of you are saying, yeah, but when I jump in, what's going to prevent me from ending up upside down, backwards, and finding out that you say the water's great, but you love swimming in Lake Superior. And it's not that great. And this all causes, potentially, a term that's been used, the digital divide, a term that's used to show the difference between those who have access to technology and know how to use technology and those that don't. And we could say the same thing might be true of professors, of educators, that there will become a greater and greater digital, or there may become a greater and greater digital divide as more and more of our learners are expecting web-facilitated online distance education. So why should instructors consider teaching online? Why should you consider teaching online? Well, because Jay said so. He told us. We should develop at least one online course in every discipline. We want to have every learner leave Bethel with having the opportunity to have taken at least one course online, because there are, in the work world, you're going to have experiences where you just need to learn. You need to be able to learn this way. Before I came here 5 years ago, I worked at Electronic Data Systems, and I remember the transition at EDS. We were 100% face-to-face learning. We did all of our learning that way. And in 3 years, starting in about 2000, we went from 100% face-to-face to almost 100% online in all of our learning. And so corporations, especially big corporations, are moving this direction. And also, it might pay to move online. We, as TLTR, as the chair of TLTR in our group, we announced 5 winners each year for the last many years, for at least the 3 years I've been part of TLTR. And we've been also provided funding for additional funding in the last 2 years for courses that were being moved online for summer school. And so there is. There are valid reasons to do this. Now the question becomes, well, is it just because Jay said so, or did Jay have really good reasons? Does TLTR and Bethel, are we funding this because we just want to give away money, or are there really good reasons why we think individuals should take this plunge? And I think there are. I know there are. The research says there is. One of the perceptions is, well, anyone who wants to teach online, they're just doing it so they can go teach on the beach all summer long. And that is actually, well, not necessarily on the beach, but having the flexibility or the freedom in the summertime or even in the fall and the spring to be able to devote more time to research, to be able to balance your workloads, to be able to balance your personal lives. Those are valid reasons to consider it. But there's more. I can be upgraded, can you? In this economy, is it valuable for us as instructors to learn how to use technology more effectively? I mean, our students are coming, they're digital natives. They know how to use this technology. Should we be maybe not as good at Facebook and using computers, but should we be able to speak their language and do things that they can do? Teaching online has the potential, I don't want to say maybe this is overstating it, it has the potential to change the instructor's role. I was speaking with Leo Gabriel, and he's on the subcommittee, and he was talking about how a lot of this conversation about online learning reminds him of the discussions we had about service learning. And that there's lots of, or inquiry-based learning, there's lots of methodologies that when you study those methodologies and you rethink your courses, it can change the way you deliver your education. You become less of a sage on the stage and more of a facilitator. More, you might be constructing the learning instead of you just spewing that learning out to learners. And I'm not saying that online learning is the only way to do that, but that's one of the things it does, is it naturally causes you to rethink, well, what is my role now that I'm doing learning this way? Online learning can lead to additional engagement. I mentioned that before, how students can become more engaged in the discussion boards. You know, how many of us lead discussions and we wonder, is that person texting right now while this discussion is going on? Is that person, you know, on Facebook, or are they really engaged? So with online learning, you can assess what they've done in that discussion. Now, you could also do that in a face-to-face course by moving that discussion online. So it isn't just online learning that can do some of these things. The students, and I don't know if I'll get to it. I think I'm going to be out of time pretty soon. The students' feedback, the benefits to them is it's the easy way out, right? I'm going to do online because it's easier. Well, no, that's not true. I probably should have done a red circle. It can be easier, but a lot of students, when they take my class, Joyce's class, the feedback we get is, wow, you're actually making me think more than I had to when I took a face-to-face class, because your expectations and the way the course is constructed. So it really isn't the easy way out. Now, it provides flexibility, which maybe can help people think that it is easier. I'm now able to rearrange my schedule. I can, in the summer, I can work a 9-to-5 job or a 4 to 10 job, and I don't have to worry about the time the class is. During the fall and the spring, students who take Joyce LeMay's Principles of Management class, they appreciate that it helps them to schedule their internships or their work as well. So it does provide more flexibility. Helps them graduate? Well, it helps give them additional technology tools so that they're ready to use those tools when they do graduate and go on to the work world. Again, it doesn't have to, but it can help. I know when I redesigned my course, I thought through the different learning styles a little bit more so than I probably did when I was teaching face-to-face. Not just the learning styles, but here's a student as we start the new school year. Mr. Whiting, I just want you to know that I'm an abstract sequential learner and trust that you'll conduct yourself accordingly. You ever have students who say, I kind of expect you to teach me this way? And online learning, you can set up the LMS and just let them decide how they are going to best learn. They have the freedom to go in any order they choose to. But of course there are challenges. It isn't all rosy. There are problems, and one of the big complaints that we got when TLTR did kind of an informal study, and maybe we'll learn the same thing out of Barrett's study, and we definitely find it in the research that I mentioned, that time is a big issue. One of the reasons people don't go online is they're concerned about how long it will take to construct that course. I've got it working already. Now I'm going to have to spend hours and hours and hours reconstructing that course. I didn't do a good job. I probably should have. Joyce tracked her hours that it took to build her mediated PowerPoints. Not the whole construction, but she was timing, all right, how long did it take me to develop my mediated PowerPoints? And her average was, it was taking close to 3 hours for her to develop a 15-minute presentation. Wow. Maybe that's part of the reason we incentivize faculty with the $2,000 grant, because there is an upfront cost. Now again, I had a conversation with Matt, and Matt clued me into the fact that over time, there's no significant difference. That if you construct the course well, you will save time on the back end because you're not teaching 5 hours, 6 hours each week. Now, one of the complaints I had and Joyce had was, yeah, but I'm filling up all that time with my online assessment and these other things that I'm doing. And maybe we've made mistakes in constructing the course. We don't assess in class every student and give them scores and give them feedback on every discussion. So maybe there's ways we could have constructed our course better, how we did the assessment. And Matt's given me some hints and tips that are going to make my courses better. So a lot of late nights where we're falling asleep on the keyboard. Pulling our hair out because the technology isn't working. We can't get the mediated PowerPoints to work. The audio isn't working, or it sounds poor. We're having trouble with new technologies that we're trying to incorporate. So there's lots of technology challenges. One of the complaints we get is I can't do this online because I need to be in front of people so I can see their feedback and see that, Matt's really bored with me right now and he's not really paying, well, he is. He isn't bored with me, but I need that feedback. What we'll see is that all of these things, feedback, higher critical thinking. Well, how am I going to develop higher critical thinking if I'm not in a class facilitating a discussion? Cheating. No way, I'm not going to be your accomplice in a felony. That's a quiz. Well, how am I going to handle cheating? I can do that in face-to-face. Oh, no, you can't. You have cheating going on there, too. How do I deal with community? I want to have a sense of community in my class. I can't have that online. And later, if I got to it, I don't think I will today, I'll kind of maybe address this right now. You can deal with these things online, but you're going to have to reimagine. Well, maybe feedback looks different. In fact, maybe it looks different and it's actually better. So maybe in my mediated PowerPoint, I can do something at the end to get feedback that they got the concepts by actually embedding questions or quizzes. Or maybe I can have a quiz afterwards. Or maybe I can have, not a quiz, but maybe I can have a discussion on what they just received and have questions that ask them to synthesize what they learned with some activity. Wow, that might actually give me feedback, but also develop higher level critical thinking than I did when I was face-to-face. Now, you could do these things face-to-face too, but you get the idea that you can re-envision. Well, community, is there such thing as virtual community? Yeah, I mean, our students how often are they spending on Facebook? And they feel like they have community with their friends, don't they? It's different, but maybe we can do that online as well. Maybe if we learn from them, we can do that. So there are approaches to mitigate the challenges, and I'll go through a couple of these. I think my key one is when you begin this journey of going down and teaching online or hybrid, before you do that, hit the help key. And the help key is TLT, Matt's group. And they were afraid of this, but I actually do have their pictures. Go to Matt. Go to Bob. Go to Molly. Go to Scott and ask them for help up front in the redesign. They will tell you that what you should do is, like my analogy in the bedroom, get everything out of there. Or a garage analogy. Take everything, throw it out of the garage. Maybe the garage analogy is even better. Go to your neighbor and see how organized your neighbor's garage is, and then go to construct your garage by finding some scaffolding and some organization methods that you can do differently. And then go to your front yard and individually pick things and put them back. And you might put some of the stuff that you had back there. My wife would love it if, with the garage analogy, I left and got rid of most of it. We got the dump day coming up Saturday, and so she's going to actually ask me to do that, that garage analogy. But with your courses, put everything on the table. Why do I need every single PowerPoint? Ask, do I need to give this slide? Do I need to give this PowerPoint? Or I was talking with Neil Dutton. Neil is going to be teaching a course this summer. He's throwing away whole presentations because he was able to find videos of other instructors walking through something that were as good, or even, he would say, even better than what he would be able to do, using technology in that process. So there are approaches to mitigate the challenges. And I have a bunch more. I have like 20 slides more, and I'm definitely not going to get through all of them today because I had the 2-minute warning come up. So maybe I should leave a minute or two for questions. I'm actually teaching an ITA class in 10 minutes, so I should have today moved that class online in case anyone wanted to talk afterwards. That would have been a good thought. Actually, Thursday I've got an online day for them, and so I wasn't thinking about the schedule here. That's one of the other comments I would make is when you develop online and deploy online, one of the things you can do is ask the question, okay, I taught this over the summer. Which pieces of this worked really well, and which of those pieces could I bring back into my face-to-face course and improve the learning, kind of like we saw a lot of you believe the blended learning is actually even better than the face-to-face. So teach over the summer. Go for a grant, teach over the summer, teach online, and then bring some of that back into a blended learning next fall or next spring. Questions?
What would you say is the biggest detractor that you see based on all your experience, just from your perspective?
For me, what was the hardest thing for me to deal with? Well, my biggest mistake the first time was the positive thing I met with you, and I reconstructed the course. But I didn't have the time the first time, or I didn't make the time the first time to actually build out the whole course before I taught it. My first summer, I built out Unit 1 and Unit 2, and during Unit 1 I was building Unit 3, and during Unit 2 I was building Unit 4, and that was a mistake. The next year it went way better because I had the whole course. I had time to make some adjustments, and the whole course was there. And it was, I mean, clearly I was going through it a second time, but I would say, while you can do that, don't do that. Try not to do that if at all possible. Good question.
All right, thank you, Steve. Let's get it from him.